There we go. Okay.
$56.02. Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Good evening, everybody. Before we begin, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll go ahead and open up the special city council meeting and call it to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to our first item of the night, and it's a creative art district presentation by Susan Wise, Executive Director of Nebraska Arts Council. And I'd like to introduce Councilwoman Ganem to introduce Susan for our special presentation tonight.
Well, I'm very glad first that Suzanne could come for to make a presentation. I learned about it through her about a month or so ago, several months ago now, through an activity that we were at, and became very interested with that. And then more through Mike Flood, Senator Flood, about it at a municipalities meeting. And Suzanne had offered to come and at least introduce this concept and tell us about it. So I was very thankful that she did that. Yes, she works as the CEO of Nebraska Arts Council, and she's worked at the regional area, the state area, and certainly at the national level to meet those goals. And it's certainly a strong advocate for the arts and works in conjunction with Nebraska Cultural Endowment, does quite a bit of work with that and serving with that, and coordinates with the humanities and any art groups out there. So we're very glad that she's here. She has served on numerous boards at the state, regional, and national levels. And so we're very proud that she has an art history major, both an MA and BA. I have a minor in art history from UNO a long time ago. So I've always liked that. But in her previous life too, before the Nebraska Art Council, she has served in various roles as a curator type positions at like Sheldon Art Gallery, Jocelyn Art Museum, different universities, and has taught at Creighton University and in our Nebraska system as well. And then she has settled in the Nebraska Art Council CEO position. So at this time, I'd like to present to you Suzanne Weiss.
If you have something to
Yes.
pass out, we can take that now. I can take that.
I'm used to the state. I have to officially hand this off to somebody when I do that. And the
Mhm.
city clerk is the person to do it.
There you go.
I have learned that if you want to know anything about a town, you go to the city.
Yeah, we'll take Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to receive.
Thank you. Councilman Lakeman,
I'll second that.
please vote.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
The floor is yours.
Well, that's a good start. Okay, so I've just given you an outline because I am not going to try and take a lot of time. I'd rather give you the information, have you digest it, and then ask me any questions that you have. But I'd first like to just tell you the Nebraska Arts Council is an agency of state government. All states have one, and we are governed by a 15-member board. And I was thinking, okay, who have we had from Fremont? And I thought Don Hines, and I was honored to be at his funeral today. He was a great council member. I believe he was appointed by Governor Nelson. And then previous to him, Tom Milliken, again, noted Fremont banker who has now been gone for a while, but he was also served on the Nebraska Arts Council. So it's one of the part of the boards and commissions structure. So you probably work with other boards and commissions of state government, and we're just one of those. So we have been charged with putting together a creative district program. And it is a new initiative that is designed to promote not only the arts and culture of your community, but it's really about economic development. And so if you go to item 3, that is where this concept came from. About 20 years ago, an urbanist called Richard Florida wrote a book, very influential, called The Rise of the Creative Class. And what he had observed is in successful cities, they were successful in large part because creatives attract creatives, and creative people, and I'm not just talking when I say creative about artists or musicians, I'm talking about engineers, people that design things, people that build things, but things that require creative thinking. And what they attract, of course, in addition to liking things like the arts, they also the people that like coffee shops, that like, boutiques, all of that. And that is really what made cities successful. You can't have a successful, thriving community unless you have this creative core. So that was his concept. So I just gave you a quote there that kind of puts that together. So that is great, except Nebraska isn't a particularly urban place. We do have, and I'm sure all of you that go to Omaha have noticed downtown, this plethora now of arts organizations like the Omaha Performing Arts, the Orpheum. Interestingly enough, if you all have ever spent much time in Omaha, you know, until they actually put together the money to build the Omaha Performing Arts and connect that with the Orpheum Theater, you never had Hamilton, you never had Wicked, never had any of that stuff. The reason you can do it now is because Omaha has become kind of a creative community city. It's attracting people that want that kind of activity. So you're thinking, okay, what does this have to do with Fremont? Well, creative districts are not just for urban areas. And the Association of Governors commissioned a study a few years ago to kind of see, okay, does this creative community concept really work in rural areas? And so I gave you a quote from that study, and it says, rural America has a robust cultural history that has enriched the nation and its people. Rural America is also beset with social and economic changes. Population migration and persistent poverty are contributing to a widening urban-rural divide in many states. By using the creative sector, specifically arts and cultural assets, it means you don't have to build anything. You have your own assets there. Governors have a viable approach for strengthening economic opportunities and vibrancy into rural communities. Arts and culture have long been part of urban rejuvenation. Now, an expanding body of research and practice showcases positive economic and quality of life outcomes associated with the rural creative sector. So that's really what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. And majority of states do have a creative district programs. Sometimes they're called cultural districts. It just depends on what it is. So your first handout behind the outline is something I took off of the web. This is from the state of Washington, and they have a really nice section on their website of all of their towns that have become designated creative districts. If you take a moment to read about this small community, Tenino, Washington is smaller than Fremont, but it's not really tiny either. What's interesting about this is if you read about the community, it is a historic, had a stone industry. So you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, the stone industry is now dead. How did they turn this around? Well, what happened is they really ramped up the whole concept of the history of that town and the way they did stone making. Then, as you can see, they have master stone carvers and a historic walking tour. And again, all of these elements that I'm sure you've heard about in different contexts. But the point being that by doing that kind of identification, they've attracted artists to their community. And now it's become a big tourist town in the state of Washington. And they got there because they went through the process of getting this designation from Washington State Arts Commission. So that's how that all works. And once we get designated creative districts, we will have those on our website as well. So it's interesting, if you Google, I tried it, if you Google Tenino, Washington, the first thing that comes up is this nice little blurb. The second thing comes up is their own website, which outlines all of this in much more detail. So unfortunately, when I Google Fremont, that's not the first thing that comes up. So something to consider. I've also included for you on the next page, because of course, you know, you guys are all interested, I'm sure, in the nuts and bolts of this. So what I've concluded is a 4-page process, which I'll just briefly go over, followed by a flow chart. I'm a visual person and flow charts are very important to me. So those are your next two handouts. So if we go to the district's program outline, the first one is what goals can a creative district achieve? It attracts artists and creative enterprises. It encourages business and job development, establishes a district as a tourist destination, preserves and reuses historic buildings. And again, you can work with a Main Street program or other things with that. and it promotes the district's cultural and historic heritage. And again, I want to stress this isn't just arts. It also has to do with your culture and its holistic historical societies, your library, everyone that is involved in the culture of your town can be part of a creative district or help create it. So to be eligible, you have to do the following things. You have to have a partnership that at minimum of 3 organizations, and one of which has to be an arts organization. And you have representatives from Fremont Area Arts Council behind me that I think would qualify very well for that eligibility. You also have to have a representative from state government. Now, it just depends on how state governments are organized and how large you are. The reason we want that is we don't want people running amok thinking they want this, that, and the other thing without somebody from the city knowing what's going on. Does that resonate with all of you? I know it does. I'm from Lincoln, and I know definitely in Lincoln, you can't just go and say, okay, well, we've decided we want historic lighting on our shopping district. Well, did you go through the process? Well, what process is that? We want that. So by having some representative from city government as part of this planning, at least they can figure out what is possible, what isn't possible. They can kind of smooth the way when it comes time to maybe if you do want things like ornamental lighting or different kinds of curb cuts. I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing there. The city knows about it and they know what to do about it. You have to have evidence of partnership, all of those things. So let's go to the next one. You can read the rest of those, but the application process, if you follow the flow chart, is a letter of interest where you name your district, your contact information for who's going to be the administrator, because somebody has to receive the money and distribute the money. And that can be anything from a Chamber of Commerce to another 501c3 to the Fremont Area Arts Council to the city. We don't care as long as there's someone who agrees to be a responsible fiduciary person. Why the community would be a good candidate and what you would do with the initial amount of money that you would receive, which is $10,000. No strings attached. You don't have to match it. You can use it for whatever you want. The reason we're doing that is we think there's going to be 2 types of creative districts. We're thinking that really small towns will probably, all they want to do probably is some beautification efforts and up their game with their website, do some marketing, all of those things. $10,000 may get that done for them. Maybe they need a little bit more, but obviously they could ask for a match from citizens, or if they have a little county community foundation, they could do that. Larger communities like Fremont potentially could think, you know what, we've always wanted to do fill in the blank. If that's the case, you can use that $10,000 to pay for a consultant to come and run you through an extensive strategic planning process over what you would do in a 5-year period, what you do in a 10-year period. You do that and you're eligible for $250,000. And again, you don't have to match it. But again, if you're looking at, we want to redo this building, we want to do this, we want to do that, that kind of money helps you leverage money from people like the Kiewit Foundation. Or if you've got Fremont Community Foundation or Dodge County Community Foundation, I see the mayor nodding his head. That is the sort of thing that you can do matching money, and it's going to be a game changer to make that happen. So I can see now I have everyone's attention with that. Okay. To get there, though, after your letter of intent is approved, you fill out, it's a fairly extensive assessment workbook where you actually do a kind of rough SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, your challenges. And you have to fill out a lot of information. The one thing that the legislature has asked us to do is to track things like if a creative district is successful, what does that do to property values? So say, for example, the creative district includes parts of town that aren't currently have properties that are very valuable. By knowing what the kind of rents are in that area and tracking that over, say, a 5-year period of time to see if having creative community activities has helped up things, that's why you have to fill out that kind of information. And then once you get that booklet submitted, we have a panel of people that will review it. And if you're awarded the designation, you get your $10,000 and you're good to go. And we keep in track of you and what it is you're going to do, either next steps or paint a mural and you're done, whatever it is that works for you. So you can see we've got selection criteria, all of those things, which I won't bore you with now unless you see something you have a question about. But now I'd like to turn your attention to the very last piece. And this is, you have to flip it over. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of states have cultural districts. And even though Texas's demographics are very different from Nebraska's, there are still things that are very true about Texas that are true of Nebraska. You have big, big, big cities, but you also have, I'm sorry, I'm not Italian either. I'm actually Danish, but I can't stop myself. Anyway, so I find often looking at Texas, because again, it's part of the Great Plains, it's a culture in some ways similar to ours. I always track things like what they do in smaller communities in Texas. And this Sherman, Texas, is about the size of Fremont. And what you see here is their plan for a cultural district. Now, they paid the Fort Worth Arts Council, they must have somebody on staff that does this, come and do a strategic plan for them. And what I found particularly interesting is if you read through it, well, the forward, it just shows a lot of town pride, I think. They've got a vision of what they want. They've got a mission, and then they've done an analysis. And the first thing you see, I think on page 5, is their cultural district strengths. So if you looked at the town of Fremont and you kind of thought about what are strengths for a cultural district in Fremont, I suspect you would come up with a list that's pretty similar to this one. Your downtown character, you could name your cultural assets, you can name your educational institutions. Now, when I saw that, I thought, okay, they've got Austin College and they've got a county college, culinary school, and then they say Pinner Middle School. And I thought, well, what about the high school? And then I thought, they probably are consolidated districts. So the high school must be in a different town. But I thought that was nice. They included the middle school in that. Then the next page is their weaknesses. So again, if you went through your weaknesses, you probably have things that are the same. East of downtown is industrial, large truck traffic on Houston and Lamar Streets. Those are probably major thoroughfares. A lack of connectivity to downtown due to a freeway. You don't have that, but you definitely have a couple of major roadways coming into town. Anyway, the point being is you would go through that and you would do something similar. Then the next page is the opportunities. Now, when you look at this one, it becomes very clear that part of the discussion is, in this case, this town, they really decided they wanted to do public art. Now, that's not saying that's what you want to do, but Sherman, Texas decided public art is what we really want to do. So if you flip to the next page, they apparently narrowed that down so they were able to put together goals and objectives to develop a public art program. Again, you don't have to go through that right away, but then you come to their map. Now, one thing you have to do when you become a creative district is you also have to have a map of what that district is. And what I found fascinating about this map is by putting this together and having a conversation about it with a lot of community members that were doing this, is they pretty much decided where you see in yellow, they thought those are the best places to put public art. So you almost have to do that. You almost have to kind of do a really good analysis and go through all of that to figure out what's going to be the most successful thing. So the red line is that entire creative district, but the yellow is where they want to do their public art. So then you decide what it is do you want to do. Next page. Well, one thing they can do is temporary art. Now, the illustrations, just as an illustration to show what they mean, is, you know, they must have billboards that are kind of scuzzy looking that nobody uses anymore. So they're thinking that might be a good place to pay for an artist to come art up a couple of billboards. Or perhaps there's a lot of things going on today with grain silos. That's become a very, very popular form of public art in smaller communities, except Wichita. I saw one in Wichita. They're claiming it's the world's largest granary public art thing. And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know about that, but it is Wichita. It's not a smaller town. And then the next page has them defining, well, they want to do that, but they also want to do permanent. And what they've done with that photo is just give an example. And in this case, they have chosen artist design benches and trash cans that will be in their district. So the reason I went through that with you is just to give you an idea of what you'd be in for if you would decide to go for the big money, that you'd have to really come together as a community and decide just exactly what it is you want to do as a creative district. And as I said, it doesn't have to be this. It could be something else. It could be actually too, I know Fremont's a big sports town, and I would think that with parks and recreation and your big why, there may be ways that you could do enhanced bike trails, enhanced walking trails, and maybe putting public art or artist design benches or something along those. And that could be a partnership, and that could be something you could tout. And that is something, again, prospective new residents of Fremont would find certainly very, very attractive. And this grant could pay for that as opposed to you trying to find the money someplace else. So that's kind of what this is all about. Well, I went through this pretty quickly, but that's why I made all these handouts so you could read later and fill in the gaps. But I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Are there examples in Nebraska that are going that direction even without the legislation at this point that you are aware of? And how many communities have expressed interest already?
Well, we've had probably 25 inquiries and we have 10 active letters of interest. What? Brownville is one of them. Now, I'll tell you that it's first come, first served with the money. I mean, it's replenished every year. We get an annual allocation of $1 million specifically for creative districts, and at 10,000 a pop, that tells you how far that goes. So Brownville is one. I know that Grand Island, they have it's a business district, a designated business district, which I'm not familiar with that term, called Railside, which is next to the railroad. And they actually want to do some sort of a sculpture walk around their business district. But our question to them is they have a couple of commercial streets next to Railside and have a lot of restaurants and we're asking them, why aren't you including that? And if we don't like the response, we may ask them to go back to the drawing board. Because to us, it makes perfect sense that you would want to include that. From
Councilman
district.
Jensen, sorry.
I'm just going to ask about the, one thing we already have in Fremont that draws visitors in is a state recreational area that's on our western outskirts.
Mhm.
Is that something that could be incorporated into into the arts development, something we could, another asset to look at?
You'd have to think creatively. I think how you do that would have to be something that, imagine there's a visitor and you want them to kind of take advantage of your downtown creative district. I'm assuming that's where you'd want it. So what is it that's going to be out there and how are you going to get them there? So one thing you could propose is, one of those light axle trolleys or something that would run during the weekend or something that would take them there for whatever activities you would have. You might want to think about maybe a big band shell or amphitheater out there and start a performing program with all sorts of acts, kind of like Pinewood Bowl in Lincoln. It's kind of been revitalized and they have traveling acts all summer long. Woody Blues were there last year. I saw them. So anyway, but I think you could make a case for that, but the point is you'd have to go through a process and everybody'd have to put their heads together to figure out, okay, how do we make this work?
Councilman Gibson.
I see a couple on the district strengths that we have already. Historic building being restored. We have one presently doing that.
Great.
Multiple churches. We have an abundance of churches in our town. And tacos. We have a lot of tacos.
It's all good. It's all good. And as a matter of fact, with churches, you might want to think about the churches, particularly the ones that are historic and like they may know about the stained glass in their churches that may, maybe not a Tiffany, but certainly from some very, very excellent church stained glass window makers of the late 19th, early 20th century. And something you could do every year is a, stained glass tour. And gee, that may actually attract some stained glass manufacturers to Fremont. Just like in this little town, they've got all these stone artists now. They're coming because of the availability of stone. I'm just riffing here, but that's something, when you said that, that certainly could be possible.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Just what are the timeframes for deadlines and that you're looking at, or is it ongoing?
It's ongoing. It's really up to you. We recognize every town works at a different pace. And, some of the people that have gotten their letter of interest in really fast has some holes in it. And we're having them kind of fix those and address those issues before we'll take them to the next level. And again, if you're talking about something like Sherman, Texas, obviously you've got your 10,000, but then, okay, who's our consultant? How are we going to do that? Where are we going to do it? That process may take 6 months or longer. And then, to actually do a 5-year plan, got 5 years to do it. So we would give you money in an incremental basis that way. So we're not quite there yet. Obviously, we're in our first year and nobody's ready yet for $250,000. They may think they are, but they're not quite yet.
Very good. Any other questions from council? Well, I want to thank you. Very informative presentation. And I think it's something Fremont needs to look at and as we continue in the future of our downtown and the success of Fremont as a whole, this is a great option. And, you know, who could say no to $250,000 if you do everything right, correct?
Well, and the one piece I didn't give you is Senator Mike Flood at the very tail end of legislative session, because he's so high on creative districts. Of course, you know, he's thinking Norfolk, he's not thinking Fremont. He put in, there's a turn back tax for the big arenas in Lincoln and Omaha. And the majority of the money is going to recreation, I believe. I believe you're eligible for some of that money. But 30% is meant for creative districts. So in years to come, we may be doing grants, and he wrote into the legislation no less than 1.5 million. And I'm going to have to make him change that, because nobody's ready for that yet. And we just don't have the staff to handle that kind of money yet. But I think if I can get him to put that down a little bit lower, that's going to be even more money. So if you burn through your first 250,000, who knows what you can achieve. So.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And they know where to go all over. Telling them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No public comment right now. Okay. Very good. We'll move on to the next item, which would be ordinance 5598 to repeal and replace chapter 2, article 5, select sections to create the position of utilities general manager and to modify the duties of the city administrator. This would be for first reading. Before I turn it over to Travis, I'd just like to say this, the items on here, 2, 3, 4, 5, are in regards to the comments I made last week of as I go out and look for positions, the best way to move forward at this point as a utilities general manager and a city administrator. And so a lot of these ordinances are in regards to making sure our code fits that, so I can go out and hire the people we need to hire at this stage. So at this point, item 2, I'll turn over to Travis for the report.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so after the decision was made to kind of shift city government in the fashion that you indicated last week, we went through and looked at the main changes in city code that need to be done to effectuate that vision. So what we've done last week is we changed specifically Articles 2, 3, and 1 and Article 8. So in the packet contains the sections that we're planning on amending. This is for first reading, so this is kind of a preliminary draft. But what this draft does is it creates the new position of utility general manager. And the vision is to have the utility general manager kind of at the same level as the city administrator, but the utility general manager would handle all the utilities contained within the city and all of those issues. And the city administrator would handle more city side issues, similar to what the structure was back, I don't know, 7 years ago or how long ago it was when it got changed. So if you look, the first few changes were just simply adding a utility general manager position. And then really the first major changes start in section 2-506. That was amended to reflect that the city administrator no longer would have administrative control over the utility side of the city. It's important to remember too, when we're talking about this, we're talking about 2 different positions, but we're still talking about one city. I mean, Fremont's still Fremont. So this isn't gonna, we don't want 2 warring factions going at it here. But the other changes made in 2-506, which is something that we've spoken about previously, we just cleaned up some of the language. I've had quite a bit of discussion with Councilman Yerger about some of the changes that are in here. What I'd like to say is if there are any changes in here that the council would like to discuss or have disagreement with, as you know, my phone line's always open. I'd be happy to talk with the reasons why those changes were made. One of them was I took out this main section about facilitating communication between the city administrator and the mayor, and that this provision would apply both to the utilities general manager and the city administrator. And really it's just to make the practical aspect of managing the 2 main aspects of the city and their communication with the mayor more practical and workable. Because I honestly feel the way the code's written right now under the city administrator section isn't really workable, but you can see those changes there. Utility general manager, it's essentially the same exact section for city administrator, just revised to reflect the utility general manager or the utility side of things. And then just going through the rest of them is simply replacing city administrator and putting in utility general manager in the requisite sections that are required. So that's for this item. I'll take any questions now, or if we just want to hold first reading and council members want to follow up with questions, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Councilman Jensen.
We emailed back and forth about the final item there about the delete about the no member of council shall serve as a member of the utility infrastructure board, that was something that was not intended to be deleted.
Correct. That was an inadvertent change. Yeah. And so that the next reading, I'll bring back an amendment that'll remove that deletion, so to speak.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
No real questions, just to follow up, because based on the discussion that you and I and the mayor had during the course of the week in preparation for this, I didn't know for sure whether or not we would see additional modifications that we talked about yet tonight, because we were past the deadline anyway. So I'm assuming the things that we did discuss, they're going to be in the second round of drafts that will come out at the meeting on the 30th.
Certainly, those will be suggested revisions that I'll bring back. Those sections that we pointed out that we missed, that we discussed, I'll bring those back, and all the other changes that we discussed. So there will be additional changes besides what we discussed tonight.
And there were some that I think needed your further investigation, not just
Yes, those
changes in wording, but those haven't been accomplished yet either, but they're still on the list and be there for the second reading.
yes, correct.
Thanks. Councilman Ellis.
I've got a question concerning your comments about the portion you're deleting about communication. Could you give us some reasons why, examples of why the council should not be included in communication with the mayor and the city administrator?
Certainly, I just, from my perspective, and this is for reviewing other municipal codes, I mean, this type of provision has never been included in there, so it's kind of a first of its kind. But as far as a practical effect that it has.
First of its kind in Fremont code?
No, and as far as other municipalities are concerned.
They don't have anything like this?
No, not this sort of particular about the communication between a mayor and a city administrator. So with this section that was deleted, that's the section that says that all communications between the city administrator that goes to the mayor also has to include city council. And obviously this has practical effects because that can't create a conversation between the mayor and the city administrator because of open meetings issues. And two, it's just involving 9 people in a conversation is much more difficult than involving 2 people.
I don't think it's a conversation. I think it's just simply to keep the council informed.
Certainly, and the way it's written, could be interpreted as communications. All matters of the city must be communicated in that fashion, including the council. That's why I deleted it, because if the next line shows that individual members of council can inquire about certain matters of the city, and really the onus will be on the mayor and the city administrator and the utilities general manager themselves to communicate effectively with the council. And I don't think that type of effective communication can really be codified, especially the way it is now. That'll just depend on having the people in those positions willing to pick up the phone and say, hey, council, this is what's going on.
So if we get ourselves into a situation where we have a city administrator that doesn't communicate, we at least have something we can come back to.
So
We
even
won't
with
have that in the future.
No, even with the suggested deleted portion in there, it still includes the provision that individual members of council.
Individual members can make inquiries, but we may not know what to inquire about.
Certainly, and that's.
And so that's what my concern is in the unity of transparency here, we've been taken down. I mean, the council really does need to be kept informed. I'm not asking for everything, but
Well, the way it's
there
written,
needs to
it's
be something in place that allows the enforcement of that communication.
and you can
And
see,
this doesn't,
and
by
if,
taking it out.
well, I would suggest removing it, and I think maybe it'd be best if you and I discuss separate language that might be more appropriate for what you're looking for. Because I think it's too onerous right now, and I had the same discussion with Councilman Yerger, and I think we can figure out something.
We need to definitely put something back in place.
Mhm.
If you think that the language here is inappropriate, then I agree, but there needs to be something that
Mhm.
the council can rest back assurance that, look, if this isn't happening, we need to go back to municipal code and says it needs to happen. So I'll reach out to you and we'll hopefully can work on some edits here. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say, and when it comes to these two positions, the utility general manager and the city administrator, you know, everybody knows, I mean, you can't have 9 bosses. They have, the boss is the mayor. And when it comes to communication, I will absolutely expect that the city administrator and the utilities general manager communicate in a way with council that is productive and helps this and helps everybody. But when it comes to, you know, a direct, you know, report from each of those, to expect on every communication that it goes to all 9 elected officials and have that codified is, you know, is unreasonable for the next person to come into this job. So you know, I'm willing to, you know, work for my expectation as mayor moving forward with these jobs is absolutely they're going to communicate with council. I mean, that's part of their job. So I just want to lay out that expectation that this isn't, you know, how far that goes is, and every time they talk to elected official, it's supposed to be with all 9. I mean, that's just not unreasonable. That's just unreasonable. But, you know, I just want you to know where I stand as mayor with that and my intention moving forward. Okay, any other questions for Travis? Okay, any comments from the public? Go ahead, up to the podium, please. Please state your name and address.
Larry Marvin, 635 North Main Street. Now, you were saying that the information, my opinion is if he gives a written report to the mayor can make photocopies for everybody, or the utility department could make photocopies and give to all of you. So to keep you in the loop and informed, sometimes we're just playing with words, but if you want to be informed and you've got the report, you need that. And if I'm dealing with people and they don't give me a proper report, I don't want to do business with them.
Thank you.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. I appreciate the concerns of Councilman Ellis, but I do agree with some of the words you had to say, Mayor Spellerberg. And I guess part of the issue that had lied to that so much had not been discussed or at least presented to council, and council literally has been uninformed for several years. That said, there is a way to get around that and be informational. That open transparency doesn't mean that every time a word is said, it needs to be passed on, but there's nothing wrong with open communication from the mayor to the council, because that also has not occurred for several years. So I appreciate the initiative that you're taking. Part of what happened in 2017, this was not a done deal. It was something that was experimental for Fremont. It didn't bode as well as what had perhaps thought. It closed a lot of doors and fractured a lot of areas within our departments. And there are some employees that feel that this is, well, actually many employees that I've spoken to in the past 2 weeks strongly support this. I think you'll find some of the stress reduced. I think you'll see some more openness. But I can appreciate the concerns that Mr. Ellis voiced. And there is a way around that, but part of it comes from you communicating out to the remaining 8. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments from council? Councilman Jensen?
If there's no additional comments, I'll make the motion to hold first reading of ordinance 5598.
Councilman Legban?
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing chapter 2, articles 5, section 2-501, 2-503, 2-505, 2-506, 2-508, 2-513, 2-515, 2-516, 2-517, 2-518, and 2-519 of the Fremont Municipal Code, and all other ordinances and part of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on first reading.
Moving on to item 3, which is ordinance 5599 to repeal and replace chapter 3, articles 1, 2, and 11, select sections to modify the duties of a utilities general manager and the city administrator. Again, this would be for first reading. Go ahead, Travis.
Thank you, Mayor. This is of the same vein of the last item. These are just changes to chapter 3, reflecting the system that we're moving toward. There were a few sections, 3-125, 3-248, and 3-318, where we need to change out of code that I didn't include in here that we need to change from city administrator to utilities general manager. And so those were the main changes in this section. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Travis? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Take a motion in regards to having first reading of 5599. Councilman Gibson,
I would make that first reading of ordinance 5599.
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay, we'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing chapter 3, article 1, sections 3-101, 3-105, 3-106, 3-108, 3-111, 3-119, and 3-123, article 2, sections 3-201, 3-229, 3-241, and 3-259, article 3, section 3-301, and article 11, sections 3-1102 and 3-1103 of the Fremont Municipal Code, and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on first reading.
Nice work. All right. Item 4, ordinance 5600 to repeal and replace chapter 8, article 2, select sections to modify the duties of a utilities general manager and a city administrator. We'll have staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very simple change to 8-213, just changing city administrator to utility general manager in that section.
Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion in regards to a first reading of ordinance 5600. Councilman Legban,
I make a motion to hold first reading of ordinance 5600.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
And now first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing chapter 8, article 2, section 8-213 of the Fremont Municipal Code, and all other ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on first reading.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 5 would be discussion and council action items for the elimination and replacement of the consolidated city administrator position structure. We'll now hear from Jennifer McDuffie, our HR director. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Director of Human Resources. Got it right that time, right? So have you passed those documents out yet?
I can now, yes.
Okay, so they are going to pass out copies of the job descriptions for both the city administrator and the utility general manager that existed prior to when the positions were combined. And we're passing these out for your opportunity to be able to review. These are kind of our starting points. And then if you have any suggestions, the mayor just asks that you get those to him.
Yeah, I'd take a motion. Thank you, Councilman Jensen.
Oh, sorry.
Motion to receive.
Councilman Legband. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay. So I'll just add in a little bit, Jennifer. So yes, so passed out is the general manager of utilities as well as a city administrator job descriptions. I just wanted the opportunity for council, not today, obviously, because you just received them. If you have, suggestions or questions for me about the job description between now and the end of the month, please let me know. I've been looking at job descriptions from multiple other cities, and we'll be putting that together and working with HR in regards to that. So this will not come back again. We do not need to approve this, but as part of the discussion tonight, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to see what the descriptions were essentially when we had the two positions. So Jennifer, you can move on to item B at this point. Oh, sorry, Councilman Yerger.
Just a point of clarification. So you said you would take input on anything we might have if we see anything relative to these, but you want that before the next meeting? Is that, or is there a different due date?
I would prefer, just because, hopefully the plan would be at the November 30 meeting, we could hopefully pass and have final reading on the ordinance changes. So I'd be able to go out and start the search as soon as possible. So I'd like to finalize the job description by the last meeting, essentially by the end of November.
Or earlier, I guess.
Or earlier,
would be
yeah.
appropriate. And so you haven't modified any of this. This is just as it was back in 2016 or 17. No changes have been made.
Those
Whatever
are the
changes.
last ones I can find prior to when the positions were combined.
So any changes that you've been investigating, Mayor, or you haven't yet been incorporated, and are there any of those yet to be incorporated that we're not privy to at this point?
Part of it was we had to wait for the ordinance changes to be completed, because a lot of whatever's in the ordinance changes may have an effect on the actual job description itself. So I guess we're gonna, if things going on with the ordinances, we'll basically work them along simultaneously. So when the ordinance changes are done, but no, I haven't included any. I have just reviewed other, as I was doing my own research, reviewed other municipalities and what their descriptions were.
Thank you.
The other items you have in front of you are the proposed ordinance changes for the utility and the city side to reflect these two positions, this position being split into the city administrator and utility general manager. Let's see here. On the city side, we had just done a comparability study with comparing splitting this position back up into the two positions. We had done that during the budget process, so we used those numbers to determine where we would sit if we go with the midpoint that came back on those studies. Our proposal is that the city administrator position would be assigned a grade 42. This pretty much falls in line with kind of where I expected it to be. I found a salary study from 2017 that it looked like it was commissioned before the positions were combined. When I looked at it at that point, the city administrator position was actually below the midpoint. If we had made the adjustment then, like we're doing now, and then factoring in the cost of living raises, they're very close, within a couple of dollars an hour of what we're proposing tonight. So this is where I would expect to see this at, based on comparabilities and based on looking at what happened in 2000, what the information was in 2017. Do we just want to talk about one at a time?
Sure.
Did you want to do first reading?
Yeah, we can just talk about each one. Or
Okay.
Councilman Jensen, do you have questions?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. is there any reason to expect what you're proposing for the salary changes to change at all? My only ask is can we go to third reading and be done with this?
I don't anticipate any changes. Oh, yes.
Well, regardless of when this is approved, it won't go into effect until January.
Would it be advisable to wait until the code is done first too before you?
Yeah,
throw
I
the
would
salary
say let's
ordinance?
get the code changes finished done too.
Okay, any other questions right now? And seeing none, go ahead. We can move on to you want to take them one by one, I guess. Is there any questions from council in regards to either one of the utility general manager or city administrator? Okay, any comments from the public? You can go to the podium if you'd like to speak.
Barboshi, Fremont, 2037 East First. I just wondered what cities we are being compared to.
Is that your only, I can't answer.
I
I'm
know,
not supposed
that's
to
why
answer questions.
Yeah, I thought,
I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards and we can,
Okay.
I mean,
I could ask
Try-
her, that's who actually I thought I was asking.
Okay,
go ahead, Jennifer. You can address the question.
okay.
Sorry,
We typically compare to other first-class cities that are in similar to size.
but what are those cities? Pardon me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Oh.
Mayor,
yeah,
just
you
for
can't answer me
your
either.
general edification, specifics about the general raise of the study are not public information, but generally it's compared to other first-class cities of similar situated stature.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Well, I don't really have any questions for staff, but I do want to make a couple of statements, I guess, tonight with regards to the mayor's direction here. And I guess I want to applaud the mayor first for taking a bold step to, I think, work as transparently as possible and installing a more an effective and efficient government structure. I think that's probably going to come to the city at some additional cost. And I'm sure the public, if you look at the information that's out there, you'll see that as well. And the administrative city side might yield some savings ultimately in that structure change, but the utility side, because we haven't been operating that way, the residents will need to understand that, there's a difference in the way that cost recovery occurs between the city side through property taxes and the utility side through rate structure on the utility side. And because of that, there is going to be a broader base, I think, for recovery on the rate side, utility side of governance. So we have to kind of evaluate all of that when we look at, well, if this overall cost for these two jobs ends up more than what we were currently paying, and it's going to, I don't think there's any question that it's going to. But if we want to move the city forward, and I know the mayor does, and having talked to him during the course of this week, transforming governance through the separation of these functions will enable the city to do that. I think it'll do it effectively. And I hope that the public gets behind the use of this structure and looks at the cost in that context with regards to the city side and the utility side. And the mayor may have more comments on that as well. But our utility side charges not just the resident customers in our city, it charges the business customers, and it charges anyone else that gets power or operations from our utility plant. And so the recovery base on that side helps mitigate some of what we're affecting here. The importance for all of this really is that we do get to the point where we have like I said, an effective and efficient way of governing the city. And I think this will work. Both these positions are going to report to the mayor directly. And
And I think that will help communication as well. So I'm looking forward to that. I want to encourage the mayor, and I guess I haven't had this discussion with legal either, but we're putting together these proposals for the ordinance salary range, and I realize the mayor needs that for purposes of being able to go out into the job market and make hires. I hope ultimately in the end that these two positions that we're going to be putting in place are positions that we put under contract. That they're not just appointed officers of the city that work under the personnel manual. There are things that you can do in contract terms that I think we need to look at, and I encourage the mayor and council to look at that on our behalf and give us some advice and counsel on that as we move forward. So again, I want to applaud the mayor for recognizing the need and for taking some action. I think this will be a good first step with regards to what we have before us. Again, I've looked at the cost, and I know that they're not going to be less than what we're currently paying when you add them together. But I don't want that to come as any real alarm to the city. Efficiency does come at a cost sometimes, and I think this is going to be appropriate. So just wanted to say that on the mayor's behalf.
Any other comments? Councilman Gibson?
I'm a little confused on something about transparency. Why is it that we cannot identify the cities we are compared to on the question that Barbara asked? Is there a?
Yep, certainly this issue kind of came up during the budget process, but those are involved in array studies that are done to determine the scale. And one main reason is those studies are used for labor negotiations. Yeah.
Councilman Ellis?
Just want to take this opportunity to duplicate what Councilman Yerger said. I do give the mayor accolades in making this move. This is a move that's going to make Fremont a better place to live. It's going to make Fremont a better place to bring business in. So I do appreciate the move. I know it's always risky in making change, but I think this is change in the good direction for the city. Thank you.
I'll thank council as well as a whole for helping me have the tools to go out and make these hires as quickly as we can so we can move the city forward, and taking the step to have this special meeting was definitely the urgency expressed and being here as well. And I guess I appreciate that and allowing us to move forward with this process as quickly as we can. So any other comments? If there's none, I will probably have to take both of these ordinance separately. So we would need to have first reading on the ordinances 5601, which would be the new Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I will make that motion to hold first reading of ordinance 5601.
Yep.
Sorry.
Staff report says ordinance 5601, but unless I have an outdated.
Travis,
Ordinance number different than the agenda.
I've got
Tyler said or I guess in the backup, it was just.
5601 is the city ordinance, and then 5602 is the utility ordinances. Those that are listed on the agenda, those are the ordinances that are being repealed. So those were the ones that were approved during the budget process. But I feel like the information that's included in the packet is fine with, as far as informing the public with regards to the Open Meetings Act. It's just the number doesn't really provide a whole lot of information to the public in and of itself. So that's fine. I just want to make sure that
Councilman Sukram.
I think we had a motion.
Yep.
I'll second that.
Okay, cast your votes 5601.
motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5586 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Excuse me, point of
Yes.
order. He said orders 5586. Is that what you?
He was
So
repealing
yeah, that's
it.
the one that's being repealed and then it'll be replaced by 5601.
Nope.
Yep.
Okay, and now it would be approving 5602.
So I think do we need to vote on 5601?
We did
that,
vote
I
and we
read
had a
it.
reading.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. Councilman Legban,
Make a motion to approve 5602, a whole first reading.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance in the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5587 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Moving on to item 6 would be moved to authorize mayor to sign amendment to Paymentus Corporation Master Services Agreement. And at this time, we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. Back in June, the City Council approved a proposal from Paymentus Corporation to become our transaction processor and to provide us with the ability to have information more available to utility customers online. In their original proposal, they included the pricing for chip reader devices. Those are not quite ready yet for working with their system. They have less expensive, as I refer to them as simple swipes. It's the swipe instead of the insert your chip. This amendment that was provided to us by Paymentus is actually a savings of $1,900, but because we're amending that original agreement, we needed to bring it before council. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? If there are none, I'd take a motion to authorize the mayor to sign amendment to Paymentus Corporation. Councilman Gibson,
I would make that motion.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the motion to adjourn.
is there a second? Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned.